Now, let's sketch out some of the myths of modernity, as Margolin calls them. And I want to begin with a commercial, not a commercial for something I'm selling, but a commercial that ran several years ago for a fast-growing bank in Iceland. Hope you didn't have any of your money there. And here my Icelandic pronunciation's a little weak. The Kaupthing Bank. And I just saw this commercial on YouTube yesterday, providentially. A long ad, almost 2 minutes long, with a fast-cutting montage of really powerful, emotionally gripping images. Everything from a space launch to that guy in front of the tanks at Tiananmen Square, to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, clips from The Matrix, long lens shots of Formula One racers. I mean, every imaginable, exciting, inspiring sort of image that you could possibly think of. And underneath this, here's the text of this confident voiceover narration. If we want to change the world, we can. We just have to think we can. If we want to see another world, and here there were shots of a space launch. If we want to see another world, we can. We just have to think we can. If we want to stop a war, Tiananmen Square, create a person, and here there's some baby in a laboratory, it's a little scary, cure a disease, we can if we think we can. Tonight, read Genesis 12, the story of the Tower of Babel, and kind of correlate this with this. And then, narrator goes on. The bank is identified here, we thought we could double in size, and we did, every year for 8 years. We thought we could increase our balance sheet, and we did, by 500% in just 3 years. We think we can continue to grow the same way we always have, by outwitting bureaucracy, by moving faster, being flexible, building clients' businesses and our own, and have fun doing it. And here's somebody doing cartwheels in an office was shown. What is Kaup thinking? Kaup thinking is beyond normal thinking. Kaup thinking is thinking beyond. It's 2 minutes. Just blows your mind. Now, on October 9th of last year, the Kaupthing Bank was forced into government receivership only days after a crisis at the Landsbanki placed it into government control. Due to a crisis throughout the Icelandic financial system, all trading in the country's equity markets was suspended on October 13th of last year. On July 29th of this year, just a month ago, the website WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks, everything is wikied now, and so you leak stuff with a wiki, exposed a confidential 210-page document listing what Britain's Daily Telegraph called, quote, highly unusual lending practices just 2 weeks before the Icelandic system failed last October, wiping out millions of pounds of savings deposited by UK local authorities and charities. This is that Kaup thinking beyond normal thinking. And I guess when you think beyond normal thinking, you do things like loan more than 6.4 billion euros to companies connected to just 6 clients, 4 of whom were major shareholders in the company. Granting these loans with partial or no collateral, the largest of which was given to its biggest shareholder, Exista, a company called Exista. Among the bank's biggest borrowers were companies connected to a man named Kevin Stanford, a retail entrepreneur who emerged in the document as the bank's 4th largest shareholder. They loaned him 519 million euros to buy shares, of which were $181 million in the Kaupthing Bank. So they loaned him money so he could buy millions of euros in shares in their own bank, using the shares as collateral for the loan. I don't know much about economics. This is beyond normal thinking. Iceland had a population of only 300,000 people. Its 3 largest banks failed, carrying $80 billion of debt, which is over 6 times the country's GDP. Let me read it again. We think we can continue to grow the same way we always have, by outwitting bureaucracy, by moving faster, being flexible, building clients' businesses and our own. Oh, I see how they do that now. Yeah, now I understand. What is Kaup thinking? It is beyond normal thinking. It is thinking beyond. If we want to change the world, we can. This is a marvelous summary of the fundamental modern myth. If we want to change the world, we can. This was not a campaign slogan for any presidential candidate. Exactly. It is the modern myth. An essay written in the 1950s by George Parkin Grant, a brilliant Canadian philosopher, asserted, quote, "The most characteristic belief of modern man is that history is consciously and voluntarily made by human beings, not, as he writes later, by providence or by fate or by divine intervention. Human actions used to be understood to be tied to divine action. In the modern world, if we want to change the world, we can if we think we can." Grant goes on, "The idea that we make history and that this is what is important is so completely taken for granted that we hardly think of it, let alone question it. The dominance of this spirit is seen in the activities that are considered most important in North America, those of engineers, the businessmen, and administrators. These are the people who are really doing something because they are changing the world. We see it negatively in the activities that are not considered important, those of the artists, the lovers, the thinkers, and the people of prayer. For these are all activities that do not change the world. We see this spirit in the terrible sadness about old age in this continent. The old person is coming to an end of being part of history. He has probably come to an end of his ability to shape history. Old people are no longer good administrative, economic, or sexual instruments. Therefore, old age is more and more seen as an unalleviated disaster." In the 1960s, about 10 years later, in another essay, Grant argued, whatever differences there may have been between the three dominant ideologies of our century, Marxist communism, American liberalism, and National Socialism, they all similarly called men to be resolute in their mastery of the future. 4 centuries ago, those who thought of mastering the future were a dreaming minority, forced to work subtly against those with some other account of time. Today, such men are our unquestioned rulers, welcomed by the overwhelming majority in both East and West. In his work, Grant repeatedly summarized the modern project as that of being committed to the conquest of nature and human nature. The conquest of nature and human nature. And here, again, if you're familiar with the argument in The Abolition of Man, you know this is a theme in Lewis's writings as well. Daniel Bell, a sociologist who brilliantly analyzed the rise of post-industrial culture, once defined the modern in terms of, quote, a sense of openness to change, of detachment from place and time, of social and geographical mobility, and a readiness, if not eagerness, to welcome the new, even at the expense of tradition and the past. And these are characteristics also of modern economy and the kind of sense of placelessness and novelty and displacement that characterizes our economic structures. It is to be modern is the proposition that there are no ends or purposes given in nature, that the individual and his or her self-realization is the new standard of judgment, and that one can remake one's self and remake society in an effort to achieve these goals. And he goes on to say there's really a single theme that focuses all of the distinctly modern movements in culture: the rejection of a revealed order or natural order, and the substitution of the individual as the lodestar of consciousness. He says that this is a social reversal of the Copernican revolution. You know, the Copernican revolution takes the Earth out of the center of the universe, at least the solar system puts the Earth going around the sun. But as he writes, if our planet is no longer the center of the physical universe, and our earthly habitat is diminished in the horizons of nature, the ego, the self, takes the throne as the center of the moral universe, making itself the arbiter of all decisions. There are no doubts about the moral authority of the self. That is simply taken as a given. The only question is what constitutes fulfillment of the self.